Hi and welcome. I'm Steve Martorano, and this is the Behavioral Corner. You're invited to hang with us as we discuss the ways we live today, the choices we make, the things we do, and how they affect our health and well-being. So you're on the corner, the Behavioral Corner. Please hang around a while. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Behavioral Corner. It's me, Steve Martorano. New year, same corner, same Steve. Before we get started, if you're just joining us, this is a podcast about everything, because that's what affects our behavioral health. In a nutshell, everything. It's all made possible by our underwriting partners, Retreat Behavioral Health. You'll hear more about them a little bit later. Our guest, I want to welcome her right away, a good friend of the program, a frequent contributor, Dr. Rhona Epstein. Hi, Rhona. Good to see you again.
Hey, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure. We reach out to Dr. Epstein at this time of the year by no coincidence. First of the year, we are inundated with the television commercials and the messaging and the social media. It's time to lose weight. It's time to get on this program, time to get on that program. So we all know about that. Dr. Epstein's specialty is food disorders. She is a clinical psychologist. She's been doing this for years, and she treats various food disorders. And she does so from what I believe is the first time I ever heard it was from her, and that is from the addiction model. First time I interviewed Dr. Epstein, I went, addicted to food? How can you be addicted to food? Turns out it's easy. Turns out it's very easy. And that's the way she treats it, from that unique perspective, that what you're dealing with here is not a moral failure or a lack of willpower, but a problem not unlike cigarette addiction or opiate addictions. So does that pretty much sum it up, Doc?
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, for people who may be hearing about food addiction for the first time, can you briefly explain? I mean, you mean literally an addiction, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, some people will disagree with the concept, and it's still controversial as far as the scientific matter. I mean, there's science that says when you look at a person's brain, that it looks just like other substances like alcohol and other substances of abuse. Actually, there's some amazing scientific evidence that it's even worse, like that they say that sugar is 8 times more addictive than cocaine. And so the way the brain lights up, it's like a pinball game in there, in the pleasure centers of the brain. When people are eating sweets, that they're getting a hit. And actually, in rat studies, the rats would pick sugar over cocaine, even when they're addicted already. So yeah, I mean, there's addictiveness. The behavior's the same. If you look side by side at the DSM of addictive disorders to people who struggle with addictive eating, it's the same symptoms, the same criteria. It fits. So,
So one of the most obvious ways it fits or mirrors an addiction, we talk about addictions in general, whether they be process addictions or physical addictions, as becoming a problem when they obviously begin to interfere with your life. In fact, threaten your life. And certainly we can see where food in an addictive manner can just make your life miserable. And so it's not hard to understand all that. I think you and I are not here to debate whether the science is adequate on that. There's certainly enough evidence to suggest that this is as good a way, maybe better, to treat these problems as any other way. So let's talk a couple of things about what are some of the typical eating disorders that you treat.
Well, I typically work with people who are overeaters, binge eaters, people who graze on food all day, obese, compulsive overeaters, bulimics. But people who really are out of control with eating. I work sometimes with anorexics, but usually only if they are people who swing between starving and binging. I'm really there for the person who's out of control. That's really my forte.
And when you mention anorexia or bulimia, we're not talking about, again, minor disorders. They are life-threatening. They can be life-threatening conditions. Right?
Absolutely.
Is sugar the be all end all to the problem? Is that the problem, or are there other factors that contribute to disorders mirroring addictions?
I think sugar's the most problematic for people. I think it's the most addictive of the foods, but I don't think surely it's not the only. I mean,
Mhm.
I meet people who, they really get into trouble with savory foods, with crunchy, salty foods. I actually find it surprising that some of the people who are having the worst problems, they really can take or leave the sweets. It's not really their problem.
Mhm.
They're really hooked on large quantities of foods that maybe, I mean, I find it surprising myself. I have a history of, uh, sugar addiction. I mean, I was like a heroin addict with
Mhm.
sugar, hardcore sugar. I was like the cream in the donut. Like I went for the sweetest of the sweets, the Oreos with double stuff, the Rocky Road ice cream. I mean, I every what if it was super ultra sweet, that's what I was going for. But I see people who, they're eating a pound of steak at dinner,
Yeah.
and
Well, I
eating.
remember. I remember your story. The first one of the first stories you told us about your struggles as a young woman with these problems, and in addition to binging and sugar addiction, you were maniacal in working out because you were worried about, I'm going to eat like this. I got to lose weight, so you're always working out. And you told an incredible story about how you would slave at the gym and then on the way home stop at Dunkin' Donuts for a dozen donuts. I mean,
Mhm.
that was a typical move for you, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
What
Totally.
do we what do we know about this is a strange question, it just occurs to me. What do we know about our taste buds and how they impact this? I mean, some people just can, they don't have that sweet tooth. Isn't it great the way we have kind of colorful and sweet terms? Oh, he has a sweet tooth. Some people don't have that sweet tooth. So
Right.
that's not is that a question of brain chemistry or where they're sensitive on their palate?
Yeah, well, probably is a brain it must be because why does one person, get their hit? It's just like, I guess, with alcohol and drugs. I mean, why is one person a heroin addict? Why is one person a cocaine addict?
Yeah.
Why is one person likes speed, another person likes, alcohol, quaaludes? I mean, you got people like all kinds of different kind of ways
Yeah.
of getting the hit,
It,
right?
it's yeah, I guess choose your poison, right? I guess. Uh,
Exactly. Yeah.
so let's talk about now, you've mentioned the kind of people you treat and the disorders that they have. Central to them, whether it be anorexia or bulimia or grazing, is they are compelled to do this. Correct?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, a sweet tooth. I mean, somebody can have a sweet tooth and be like, "Oh, I like my sweets." I mean, that's a normal person can have like a taste of a little sweet after dinner, and they're good to go. They've satisfied their craving for their little dessert, and they're good to go. But for somebody who is struggling with addictive behavior with their food, it's a compulsion. It's driving them. They're obsessed with it. They have to have it, and then they have to have. It's like, well, they say, one is never enough, and you're right. Like one is too many, and 1,000 is never enough. So you start with the one, and you think I'm just going to have one, and then that compulsion comes over you, and then you just what you meant to only have the one cookie, and then it's like 9 years later and you're a slave to the cookies and you can't stop and you want to kill yourself because
And it's characterized by that what you just described as it is a lack of control. The impulse control doesn't work. There is no stop sign in your
exactly
head, right?
no off button.
No
Exactly.
halt button. You just go for it until you're either sick or vomiting or something. When you treat these people, do you begin at that point psychologically or physically? What's going on in your life and your relationship to food that causes you not to stop after one donut?
Yeah.
Is that where
Well,
you begin?
yeah, I mean, I think you have to help a person see that they have a problem, right? I mean, obviously some people when they get to me, they search the web looking for somebody who treats this problem. They're looking for help because they know they have a problem. And, they all usually when we start talking, I start asking questions
Mhm.
to see like, not everybody who has a problem with overeating has an addictiveness. Not, sometimes it's an emotional problem. Sometimes people are eating because they're bored, or they're eating because they're stressed, or they're just, it's like a coping strategy that if you can teach them a different coping strategy, they can learn it. It's not really the same as somebody who, since they were little, they've been hiding and sneaking and lying and, compulsive. I mean, there's a different, so you have to assess a person to find out whether, you need to be really treating it like an addiction, or, more like an emotional,
Mhm.
psychological problem. So, right. So, I mean, when I meet a person, I don't just jump in and start calling all food disorders addiction.
Oh, got it. Uh, when 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 there is this notion of addiction model that seems to be presenting itself, one of the things in substance abuse treatment, they talk about identifying triggers that might cause you to go off the rails. Are there food triggers?
Absolutely. And my first book was called Food Triggers. It's the name of the book. But oh yeah, I mean, I probably spend a lot of time helping people, because that's such an important part of recovery, is understanding the physical and emotional and spiritual triggers, and being able to identify how to navigate it. Sort of like, what are the landmines? What are the things? So there's food triggers that are like, uh, you know, I mean, for me, it's sugar, and there's also any processed foods are oftentimes triggers. People eating white flour, or anything that's not real food,
Mhm.
is oftentimes triggering, because the person needs to eat food that's real and have their body nourished. And if they're not properly nourished at their meals, then they're going to be triggered. So even dieting can be a trigger. Starving. People are like, now it's the beginning of the year and everybody's on their diets and they're hurrying up to lose weight because they have these shiny new weight loss programs, and restricting is a trigger. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
people get up, and I have people will say to me, I didn't eat breakfast today and I'm feeling great about myself. And I'm like, yeah, how long is it going to last before you are so hungry you end up binging? So a trigger can be a food that is addictive. Like, certain foods are made so that we won't be able to stop eating them.
Yeah.
Those munchy, crunchy things that we buy, that are crackers, that are made so that you can't resist eating the whole box. I mean, somebody thought that through real well. I mean, they were made so you can't stop.
Oh, my favorite example of that is whenever they take something that's fairly well known, and you're right, it's usually a sugary kind of snack, and
Mhm.
you've known it in one size for many, many years. And then suddenly you find next to it in the store a bag of the same thing, only in bite size proportions. And I always looked at that as, oh, they just want you to grab handfuls of that stuff because it looks smaller. So I can eat more
Mhm.
than if it were a large size thing. Yeah, there is a concerted effort to get us to eat in certain bad ways. You talked about processed food in a nutshell. That's anything that's in plastic, pretty much, right? Anything that's wrapped up is processed. Uh,
Not real.
and I'll give you a personal example. When I several years back wanted to lose some weight, and I got caught up in the Atkins diet, and I read his book, and it
Mhm.
seemed to make sense. And I lost some weight on it. But it was without a doubt one of the most difficult things I have ever tried to do. Got a fairly good amount of self control, but I found cutting carbs out of my diet completely almost impossible. And it was a real painful thing. And at some point, it occurred to me that, first of all, you couldn't eat all the bacon in the world. They told you could, but you can't. And I would find myself not so much hungry after I'd eaten, I was sated, but
Mhm.
craving that piece of bread.
Mhm.
And I said, wow, it looks to me like carbohydrates are cause craving. Is that true?
Well, so there's healthy carbs, and
Yep.
then there's the carbs that are really unhealthy. So like it depends on what you're choosing for your carbs. So right, so I think in the day that we're in 2024, there's a huge thing about I mean, that in at our age, we've seen it all, right? We've gone through seasons where it was, fat is bad. Now today it's carbs, right? So all the gurus out there are scientifically proving that you should eat a high protein, high fat, low carb diet. That's what everybody's saying. Personally, I think that eating a balanced way of eating is the best thing. Although I understand that the science behind this, and people will lose weight, and everybody wants to lose weight. The problem about what you just said, and what I see in my practice, is that people will hurry up and lose their weight without the carbs, but is it sustainable?
Yeah.
And my goal with people is to help them find something that is sustainable. And if you can't live on it, then you're just doing a short-term fix that's going to end you actually gaining weight in the end.
Yeah.
So I think learning how to pick healthy, not the carbs that are like the white flour processed carbs, but sweet potatoes. Those are carbs that are stick to your ribs, and they fill you and they're good for you. Brown rice is another, and these are carbs. See, some of these people who are stripping you of all carbohydrates, they'll say, don't eat any of those. But I think you need them.
Yeah.
Oatmeal, that fills you up. It gives you a little more feeling of fullness. And if you're trying to do recovery, you need to be full from your healthy food so that you're not then looking for junk food.
Our guest is Dr. Rhona Epstein. She deals, as you can see, with food and eating disorders. With this other thing about dieting, and everybody's got a new plan. Dieting's really putting the cart before the horse, isn't it?
Well, dieting is what we all are looking for, is the fast fix. And what we're doing is trying to fix the weight problem and not the eating problem.
The reason that you're overweight to begin with, correct?
Exactly. And that's what we're anxious about. And that's what we're upset about. And that's a big part of what I get caught up with people, because they really just want to lose weight. They don't want to change. But if you're going to stop having a roller coaster relationship with food, like people go on diets, they gain, they lose, they gain, they lose. And most people trapped in that end up in the end, really, it's like gambling. You lose in the end, by gaining weight. You don't really lose weight that way, because you end up gaining weight after your diets.
Yeah.
So teaching a person about having a healthy relationship with food, where you don't abuse it and you're not trying to fix the addictive behavior by starving yourself into being a thin person, but then you can't sustain it. I mean, it's crazy, the roller coaster, right?
Yeah.
You're on, you're off, you're in, you're out, you're on, it's crazy.
Well, it's extraordinary that there should be such a gigantic business in diet plans, when there's every bit of evidence that yo-yo dieting is a real thing, and everybody knows it's a real thing. And yet I'm going to be the one who will keep the weight off. It just never works out that way.
Well, they're brilliant with the magic cure thing. I mean, they're brilliant.
We're going to get to a magic cure thing in just a moment. But before we do that, a little bit more of your clients and who you see. There had been, and I think this has probably changed for a very long time, the notion that eating disorders were almost overwhelmingly problems for women, young women, and women of all ages. That's changed. Do you treat both men and women?
I do. Men struggle with all kinds of eating disorders. And I think it's a shame, because I think what happens is that men think that, it's a big deal for them to go into recovery. But, actually, Overeaters Anonymous has multiple OA meetings just for men a day. Men are meeting from all over the world. They have found recovery. So it's absolutely not just for women.
Yeah.
So
I know that you mentioned in your on your website and in your practice and the books you've written about food addictions and eating disorders, that there is a spiritual component that people ought to address if they're going to conquer something like this. That's certainly true for substance abuse sufferers as well. We certainly know that the big book, talks about a greater power. And many people, who scientists will tell you that these addictive behaviors are an effort to fill some hole
Yep.
that's there. I've spoken to so many people who have recovered from substance abuse, and they all say the same thing about why it started. They never felt they fit. They were always out of place. Something was missing. You deal with that with your clients and your patients all the time, right?
Absolutely. Well, for me, I mean, developing a spiritual life was like the solution. It's like the missing part. It was like, you're going along in your life and food's filling a hole, but it's not, I mean, it doesn't satisfy. So that's the name of my books. And I have several books that are that's the program I run called Satisfied. But it's like, and that's sort of the whole point. It's satisfied with your food, satisfied spiritually, emotionally satisfied, right? There's like, that's what we need, is to be filled, right? So being filled spiritually is that's the solution. It's like there's an emptiness and we need to fill it.
You know what's more insidious about a food addiction as opposed to a cigarette or tobacco or substance abuse, that are deadly and devastating as well? But in that emptiness, that lack of meaningful meaning in your life, when you try to fill it with something like heroin, I mean, you can see how ridiculous that is, and what the end result will be. On the other hand, if you feel, less than worthwhile, filling it with food doesn't seem to be a danger, right? Because we all eat. So if I'm feeling bad, maybe I'll feel better if I have 2 pieces of cake. There's something, in other words, what I'm saying is food is so common and we need it. It can mask those things, those the loss of spirituality.
It can, except for really just like all of them, it just blocks your spiritual. It's like if there's a pipeline between us and God, then the food ends up blocking the pipeline. There's no, you can't experience your life in fully because now food's sort of clogging the pipeline.
Yeah, it's not enough food in the world. Yeah, right.
There's not enough food in the world.
Not enough food in the world. Yeah, it's always great to talk to you because this is such a fresh, and some would say, well, spirituality, what's got to do with that? Stop eating, Now we've gotten into a new realm. I think it's a new realm anyway. And I wanted to kind of sum up. It's a big topic, which is why we have Dr. Epstein with us very frequently, because there's so many things to talk about. I'd like to get your impression on this new class of weight loss drugs that have swept the entire world. I guess Ozempic am I pronouncing that right? Ozempic is the most notable of them, but there are others. And if I understand it, and I haven't read enough about it, the central premise here is that these drugs eliminate the craving for food. Is that what's going on with these drugs?
Well, that's what it should do. But with a true food addict, that doesn't really work. I mean, it's just like the medications that they use to try to treat alcoholism. I mean, how's that go?
Well, but it's interesting you mentioned that, because for the longest time, every reputable clinician or organization that was treating substance abuse operated on the abstinence model. Okay, here's how you stop this stuff. Don't do it. Just stop. Don't do it. But they slowly had to recognize that there were medicines that could be used to help the process, along with everything else. So
Exactly.
it's called MAT. I know you're aware of MAT. So when we get to this issue of food disorders, and we've got drugs that they say can treat it, do you believe that they ultimately will be beneficial in a broader program?
I think it's the same thing. And I used to be a drug and alcohol counselor. That's what I did.
Mm-hmm.
The bottom line is people are abusing their addictive substances for a multitude of reasons. I just finished a group before I got on here, and a person's talking about uh, feeling very overwhelmed with shame over something, and this person's trying to be in recovery but ends up eating because of shame. Right? Not an uncommon story. Feeling bad about herself because something happened, and medication doesn't stop shame. So medication doesn't stop a person from hating themselves. It doesn't stop them from feeling lonely and bored. So you can give the person medicine and it might reduce their cravings and it might help. So if just like the medications that you use for substance abuse to reduce cravings, it
Mhm.
could help. But if the person doesn't have a transformation, like in the 12 steps, there's a transformation that a
Yes.
person experiences. They have a healing of their soul and a healing of their spirit and their mind, and they have a transformation. But if you're just going to rely on a medication, a real food addict, it's not going to be enough. And I'm seeing that with my clients. I see people, they're on the medication and they're still binging their brains out. And the medication may have helped them lose 10 pounds, but they're still sneaking and hiding because they have other reasons why they can't
Yes.
stop.
Yeah. Well, that's why your model is so, this moment with these new class of drugs is a great moment to take a look at how very close food abuse can be an addiction model, in that what you just said is perfectly obvious. You're right. Suboxone will cut down the craving, but if it is not administered in conjunction with talk therapies, counseling, and all of that, it's not going to do anything for you. Same is true with Ozempic. If but it's dieting, Rhoda. Everybody's looking for that magic pill, and then all the problems will go away. I think people are going to be very disappointed. It's interesting too that it works on some part of the brain that stops cravings for other things too. So they really don't know much about it. I've read that it also can cure smoking addiction, or it has shown some
Yeah.
helpful.
Well, the
So it
only
is a
thing
very
is
strange
there's
time.
also some concerns I've recently heard, and of course, look, I'm not a medical doctor, but I listen to different people who I trust, and I have recently heard some uh, of the downsides about long-term use and side effects and the fact that people have to stay on it, and once they would go off of it they're going to gain their weight back. So again, if there's no transformation and you're
Yep.
relying on medication, I mean, so ultimately the person needs to change.
Yep. Yep.
And
No
I
doubt.
said this to one of my clients the other day who's on the medication. I said, look, you are having a reduction in hunger right now. Let's use this as your opportunity to really work on your recovery work. Get involved in your support system, really do the 12 steps, like go all the way, go all in, get some stuff together while your cravings are lower, while your hunger is a little reduced. And let's use it as a tool. If you're going to be on the medicine,
Mhm.
let's take advantage of it. So she is. So if she does the transformation, then, we can talk about them. She might not need the medicine later, right?
Yeah. 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 Because she's gotten to the root of the problem. Let me finally ask you this, and we'll let you go because I know you're busy. Um, in substance abuse, they talk about, or alcoholism anyway, there's not a cure. You're just going to manage this disorder. With regard to eating disorders that you treat and the fashion in which you treat them, do you look to cure the disorder or to help the person manage it?
Well, I guess it depends on semantics, really. I mean, even the AA Big Book tells you that you can recover, as long as it says that you have a daily reprieve that's based on your spiritual condition. So the AA Big Book promises that you will no longer be fighting, that you will recoil from it as from a hot flame, that you can actually experience freedom, that you won't be tempted. I believe in that that's a possibility. I mean, I think that once people understand, like for myself, I have 40 years of recovery experience. Celebrated 40 years of recovery. Honestly, I'm not bragging. I'm bragging on the program. My recovery is based on I try my best to practice what I preach, right? So I practice what I preach. I have to live well. I have to work on my inside stuff, my relationships, my spiritual life, my health, but I also understand some things. I cannot eat one cookie. I know that one cookie is like sticking a needle in my arm. I
Mhm.
cannot have one. I cannot even consider or contemplate the idea of it. It's off the table. As long as I don't pick up the foods that are off limits to me and I follow my routine boundaries with food, and I try to maintain a relatively sane life as much as I possibly can, which of course that in itself is a challenge in this crazy world. And, dealing with all the things, the
Yeah.
stresses,
Yeah.
whatever. I don't fight temptation. I believe if I did start to play with
Yeah.
so I believe I see people every day who experience this, what they call neutrality. That's what from the big book, the AA big book. And this is
Yeah.
12-step language, right?
Yeah.
Neutrality is when you could sit in the room with it and it doesn't call you.
Yeah, and you just said it, when talking about curing or just managing a disorder. At some point, you're splitting hairs here because you're doing both things. As a matter of fact, you are, as you say, living within it. That means sort of managing the situation. But for all practical purposes, as long as you've managed the situation, you're cured. Um,
Exactly.
so it's very helpful to hear that. Rhona Epstein, you're the best on this topic. I mean, you just are. It's just so fascinating to hear the way you've approached this. You have a wonderful website, which I've been looking at. It's filled with lots of information. The titles of all your books. You have many. How many books have you published now?
I have 4, and I'm working on one right now that'll probably come out. Will come out in 2024. On the next one's going to be on. We'll have a food plan guide and some recipes and things like that. But yeah, I got.
Oh, I'd love to do a recipe show. We'll have to have you back on. We'll have a link to Dr. Epstein's site, and there's a phone number that you can call if you're in the our area of the world, which is the Delaware Valley. She's a phone call away. You are accepting patients.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I have also a 15-week online program that I've been offering that is like an immersive opportunity for people from anywhere. We get online and do a Zoom group, and people kind of recovering together, and that's been a very powerful experience. There's videos, everyday videos, 2 videos a day, short ones, real short, and then 15 weeks of coaching calls. And it's kind of like a mini rehab for people who want a little extra help. And I pulled that together, and now I've just going through the second time, and it's been life changing for the people going through. I'm super
terrific.
Yeah.
They can access all of that from your website, correct?
Well, yeah, they can find, they can find that information on my website, or just, call me.
Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
We'll have the connection for all that. Well, good luck with the new book. Happy New Year, and please, when it comes out, get your PR people to alert us. We'd love to have you back, as always.
Thank you.
Rhona
It's
Epstein.
always a blessing. I love being able to hang out with you on the Behavioral Corner.
We go back a while, right?
I know.
Go way back. Anyway, thank you all as well. Welcome to the podcast in the new year. This is the beginning of our 5th as a podcast. You know the deal. Like us, subscribe to us, do that whole thing. We appreciate it. Behavioral Corner. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Retreat Behavioral Health has proudly been serving the community for over 10 years. Here at Retreat, we believe in the power of connection and quality care. We offer comprehensive, holistic, and compassionate treatment from industry-leading experts. Call 855-802-6600 or visit us at www.retreatbehavioralhealth.com to begin your journey today.
That's it for now. And make us a habit, hanging out at the Behavioral Corner. And when we're not hanging, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter on the Behavioral Corner.